You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program. Back with us on the show, Amelia Arcamone-Makinano. She worked for the New York Post, writing education articles that won praise from U.S. Secretary of Education William Bennett. Was a New York City teacher for 24 years, a United Federation of Teachers chapter leader, mortgage broker prior to the 2008 foreclosures, and twice named Best New York City Attorney upon litigating before the New York State Supreme Court, pro se. She's here with us on the program to talk about her new book, which we did the last time, a fascinating discussion, Kronos, the All-Devouring Federal Reserve. This is a very interesting, provocative account of the Federal Reserve. And Amelia, it is great to have you back with us on the program.
Oh, thanks so much. It's so good to be back with you.
There was so much more to talk about, and we were saying before the program, the more I read, the more questions I have, so we'll try to compress them in the course of the program today. Has there ever been more of a governmental agency that's impacted our lives so dramatically that we know so little about?
Wow, that just sums it up. This agency it exists in a veil of secrecy. Very few people know about it, and that's not by any accident. It's being done on purpose. The Federal Reserve puts out the myth that it exists to keep the economy stable and that it exists for the benefit of the people. But if you really look closely at it, which is what I tried to do in my book, is that there's another layer, and the best way to figure it out is to just go back into how it all started. We talked about it before, but just to give a quick overview, in December 1913, President Woodrow Wilson, he took the nation's wealth from the U.S. Treasury Department and he handed it over to John Pierpont Morgan and his gang of thieves. Just a few months after, they were determined to be a menace to the country following a congressional investigation into the Depression of 1907. So these were bad guys. There was no doubt about it. The only reason why the nation's money was handed over to them is that they were so wealthy that they were actually wealthy enough to blackmail the government, and which they did.
You know, it's interesting because it's really mysterious. We know about the Fed. We hear it all the time, speculation. Everybody's concerned with, the stock market, what's going to happen. Should I buy a car? Should I buy a house? What's the Fed going to do? And we know little about it. And this mystery, when you talk about when Wilson signed this was Christmas weekend back in 1913, so it really got very little publicity. This has sort of been shrouded in mystery from the very beginning, hasn't it?
Well, yes, and it was purposely done on the Christmas week, so right. He was counting on nobody knowing about it, and it's not really an easy thing to understand. But luckily, for some, and I'm thankful to the Federal Reserve because they recently released some documents online, so I was able to access things without, going to Washington, D.C., to the Library of Congress. And now the founders actually kept a lot of records that I was looking into. And, yes.
With the book, and the book is called Kronos, Kronos, All-Devouring Federal Reserve, you've done extensive research in this, and you've used primarily the records of the Federal Reserve. You mentioned you've been able to go online and get some of those and do research on those. Basically, you're taking their actions and then put the book together. So what you have in the book, it's not speculation on your part. It really is all based on fact.
Well, these are primary resources. These are the actual documents, and they kept very good documents in the begining. Now, not now. Of course, now they know better, and they're not as transparent as they used to be. After World War II, it became much more difficult to track these things down. So I made the most with what I could find, and but I mean, things really haven't changed much since the beginning. Now, when the Federal Reserve Act was written, these people, this gang, I'll call them, they took away the power of Congress to audit the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve actually determines the interest rate and the value of our currency, which is really supposed to be the job of Congress. So that's why it's good to go back to the beginning, because it sets the stage for what is still occurring now. And what they did, how they profiteered from World War I, and how they would create depressions, the Great Depression, on purpose in order to make a profit. It's still going on. Apparently, it's still going on. You could see what happened from 2008 to 2014, and the bailouts and who exactly is making money.
And we'll talk about that. It's all in the book Kronos, Kronos, Fed.com is the website. Kronos is the book, All-Devouring Federal Reserve. You make the argument on the website that this is a blatant violation of Article 1 of the Constitution. Let's talk about that, because what you're saying is it's not the Treasury that was designated to basically handle money matters. We've got a group of private bankers that are doing that for us, only we don't necessarily know it.
That's right. These are private bankers who are working for their own self-interest. Now, the Federal Reserve is a group of these bankers. They share profits with the U.S. Treasury Department. Now, the first one was way back Alexander Hamilton. Thomas Jefferson hated the idea that Alexander Hamilton put on the table. But Hamilton said that this is a necessary evil. And that's how Thomas Jefferson lost his battle against a central bank. The Federal Reserve, by the way, is the third central bank. And they refused to call themselves that because people knew what a central bank was, but they didn't understand what a Federal Reserve was. So just the name is a cloak of secrecy from their wrongdoings.
And people don't really have an understanding, do they, of the extent the Federal Reserve is in our lives. We think if we're not buying a car, if we're not buying a home, probably has little impact. It influences basically all phases of our lives. And we'll talk about education here in a second, because that's something that they dramatically influence as well.
That's right. That was my big surprise, because just like everybody else, what do we know about the Federal Reserve? Well, every once in a while they make a determination as far as the interest rate. That's all we know about them. But they actually are involved in every minutia of our lives, much, much more than I expected, because when you think about it, they determine bank loans, whether or not you'll be approved, and how many and how much of our lives are affected by money, and they even, well, we'll talk about that more when we get into education, I suppose.
Well, let's talk about it. And again, the book is Kronos, All-Devouring Federal Reserve. The website is kronosfed.com. The author is Amelia Arcamone-Makinano, with us once again on the program. The first show we did sets a lot of the groundwork, the basics for what we're talking about. If you go to thisweekinamerica.us, you can go to our YouTube channel and see that interview. You can go to iTunes and listen to that. It is fascinating. Of course, the book is available all across the country. And you talk about 1965, when the federal government got involved in education. Talk about that, because this happened, and I would bet you most people, the vast majority, would have no idea the impact the Fed has on the educational system.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first step is the Federal Reserve linked itself with a banking monopoly. Now, that shouldn't have happened. Now, in 1965, the federal government, who has a business partnership with the Federal Reserve, again linked itself with the education system. So I call it the unholy trilogy. And two things happened. The first thing that happened is the quality of education deteriorated once the federal government started writing curriculum. But the second thing that happened is that the integration was destroyed. Racial integration was destroyed. In 1964, you have the Civil Rights Act was signed after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and President Johnson signed it. But after he signed that, he undid the jewel of the civil rights movement, and he undid the whole idea of integrated classrooms.
And you talk about the Fed putting minorities into inferior classrooms, and this is, again, it's not speculation on your part. It's something that you saw every day for, the 24 years that you were teaching. I mean, you know firsthand the impact of this. Yes,
I saw it. I worked in a school that's a Title I school, and it wasn't segregated. They call them apartheid schools, which is, I think, a good name for it. We all know that, and it was known this is why, since 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, we all knew that there's no such thing as separate but equal, that schools that are apartheid schools are inferior to regular schools. Just the act of segregation, racial segregation, has a deteriorating effect on the educational quality, and the students know it. The students know that they're being put on the outskirts of society, and it really damages them. They can't learn as well, and that's a proven fact. Now, the way it was done, of course, well, all right, in the title, what Title I is a grant from the federal government, but it comes with strings. The only way the schools can be qualified to be a Title I school is if they have a high concentration of poor students. They don't say Black or Hispanic. Of course, they're not going to say that.
Right.
But they say poor students. So if you look at the charts, I showed you a chart in the book, 1965. No surprise, Black and minorities were the poorest students, so it has to be them. And the tragedy of this is that, of course, they're poor because of the discrimination. So they never really had a chance to climb out of poverty because they were taken out before all the good intentions of John F. Kennedy and Reverend Martin Luther King. It just undid all of their good work of the civil rights movement, was undone by President Johnson, who really, I feel, knew what he was doing.
We're talking about the book Kronos, All-Devouring Federal Reserve. The website is Kronos, and that's Kronos. KronosFed.com is the website. Amelia Arcamone-Makinano, our guest on This Week in America. Again, back in the program, the first interview, you'll be able to go to our website and see. Time going by too quickly, and there's so many things to talk about, and we'll continue our conversation. But before we wrap up here, I want to talk about if we decided that we were going to reduce the federal debt, the deficit that everybody wants to do. I understand that would do two things positive. It would reduce the deficit, the money that we owe, and that would starve the Federal Reserve. So they're not necessarily wanting us to reduce this debt then, are they?
No. And there's a very big debate right now about what's better, a large government or a small government. And clearly, from what I found out in this book, small government, small debt is better for us. And what we have here with a large debt, the Federal Reserve just keeps printing money. Okay, it's a Federal Reserve note. What is that? It's a promissory note. That's what we have. It's not a gold, a paper that you can give to a bank.
Right.
They have a $20 gold note. You could give it to the bank and you get $20 worth of gold. Can't be done anymore because what we have is it's an IOU. Now, for each of the 12 banks, they have a slightly different looking bill, and for each of these banks. And it shows how much money does that bank owe the government. Now, what happened is, it's reason why this is a terrible violation of the Constitution, and I really don't know how this is happening, is that it's only paper money, and yet it's legal tender. And this is what's, it's the currency right now is out of control, and we are paying the price.
It has to be shocking to you, an educator, a researcher, an attorney. Again, when you look at this and you offer some tips to rein this back in, give us something real quick in the final couple minutes of the program that we should be doing, so we're sort of like getting rid of this obstacle.
Unfortunately, we can't get rid of the Federal Reserve because they made it in such a way that the economy could implode. So the best thing to do is to starve it by reducing the debt, because before, when the debt was reduced with President John F. Kennedy, you could see that, and we go into an era of prosperity, and the jobs come back. So we must, reduce the debt for our sake. The debt is high for the sake of the rich, and it's low for our, so the middle class can make a comeback. These bank bailouts that are going on all the time is we're paying the debt or the price because the value of the currency goes down, every time the money is printed. My recommendation, reduce the debt, and we must bring back enforcement of the discrimination, anti-discrimination laws. It's not happening right now. It's really a shame. And this is why we have Black Lives Matter, and people are wondering. This is why the racism is coming back. It's not supposed to be like this, really.
And it wasn't years ago. It's a fascinating book, a frightening book as you read it. Kronos, that's Kronos, All-Devouring Federal Reserve. The website is kronosfed.com. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on and go directly to Amelia's website. Our guest once again on the program, and we will have her back, Amelia Arcamone-Makinano. It's an excellent book, and the website is fascinating as well. It's a blog, and you've got some thoughts up there, and it's interesting. I mentioned in the beginning this basically is unconstitutional, and all that information is there, again, in well-documented form. Thank you so much for being with us on the program and helping us make sense of something that it still remains a mystery to all of us today.
It shouldn't be a mystery. It should be out in the open, and that's what I tried to do.
Well, and you're doing an excellent job with that, and it is a vital part of our government, and you're right, we should know what's happening. All the information available at the website kronosfed.com. The book is Kronos, All-Devouring Federal Reserve. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Stay tuned, we're back after these messages.